second part of the tutorial on how to draw more complex poses with the help of your simplified armature and simple geometric forms. So in this case we have a model with a slightly more complicated pose, something similar to weight shift but not quite. Let's draw an oval for the head. I notice that her head is tilted at a really slight angle. I can use my center line to help me figure out what that angle is. Then her neck comes out at a slight angle as well. And then I notice that her rib cage is more or less straight up and down. I might be wrong about this, but I'm going to be pretty close anyway. Then I notice that her hips are jutting off to the side, like this. This is a difficult thing. How much exactly should I jut the hips out? Well, one thing that can help me is by looking at the middle of the hips and see what the vertical alignment is between the middle of the hips and her head. When I check the model, I notice that her hips are running through the side of her head approximately here. Mostly this is a question of eyeballing. And really, the more time you spend doing this, the closer you're going to get. I'm going to spend a lot of time here making sure that this is exactly right, because this is the essence of gesture. If these three initial shapes, the head, the rib cage, and the hips, are not quite right, nothing else is going to follow. So it's really the orientation of these three shapes that determines the rest of your drawing. Spend a lot of time here really thinking about what the orientation is. Okay, so now I'm going to think about the rotation. The model is looking directly towards me. Her rib cage is oriented more or less directly towards me. And then I notice that her hips, instead of being straight, have a slight tilt. How can I tell? I can see the trochanters on both sides. Right? Sometimes you can see the iliac crest. It's a little depression here across the abdomen. We can use that. But I can see it. I can see the rotation, the tilt anyway, going this way. And then I notice that her hips are rotated ever so slightly this way. By the way, unless somebody's standing perfectly straight at attention, like a guard at Windsor Castle, the hips, the head, the rib cage, and the hips are never going to be lined up along the same vertical axis. There's always going to be some kind of shift. The better the model, the more the shift. An experienced model will never take a pose that's stiff, that's absolutely lined up like this. So really, the last couple of weeks we've had very simple poses. You're more or less never going to see them again. Why? Because they're really uninteresting. They have no flow, they have no energy, they have no movement. Okay, now let's talk about the legs. Before I draw the legs, it would really help to figure out where her center of gravity is. So I'm going to line up my pencil with the top of her head and see where the top of the head lines up against her heels. Top of the head and the heel on her weight-bearing leg is lined up. So now when I draw the leg, I know that I need to aim my heel in that direction. In order for a figure to stand, the center of gravity needs to be between the feet somehow. Once the center of gravity leaves the feet, the model starts looking like they're falling over. So when the pose gets complicated, check the center of gravity, the plumb line between the head and the feet, and make sure that the plumb line runs somewhere between the feet, never to the outside. That's going to help make your drawing look like it's actually standing up as opposed to falling over. So this leg starts a little bit lower. This one starts higher, bends forward ever slightly, goes this way, then bends back a little bit. I'm looking at angle, I can measure distance. I'm not doing it. Sorry. Hopefully you guys can see this. Here's my initial armature. Looks like this knee's a little bit higher. And the whole point of this is to be able to see the pose, the proportions, the scaling, of course, very, very early. Okay, so we have some additional complications. Her arm is lifted above her head. When that happens, the collarbone, which starts here, moves upward, and then you want to draw that egg shape facing the same angle as the arm. So the arm is going which way? It's going this way. Let's shift the angle of my oval a little bit to indicate the same angle as the arm. Arm goes up. The elbow is a little bit lower than the top of the head and then goes down. In this case, the shoulder is overlapping the rib cage a little bit because it's moving forward, and then we have foreshortening. This is measurable. I can measure from here to the elbow, compared to the head size. But again, a lot of this becomes instinctual. I can use it to measure, I can use the head to measure, but you can start seeing this stuff after a while. Everybody, at every step, stand back from your drawing, check the proportions, right? So once I'm done with a simplified armature, I stand back, I check the proportions, I check the rotation, I check the angle. Keep checking at every step so you can make corrections before the drawing gets super advanced. Alright, now we're going on to our simplified geometric volumes. So we have our cylinder for the torso. Everybody, make sure you're drawing your elliptical shapes to indicate the angle, the rotation. We're trying to think in 3 dimensions. So when you guys are drawing these simplified forms, make sure it's really, really clear which way they're going. This is a form that's going back in space. The idea being that if I take this drawing to some kind of manufacturer, they'll be able to make a 3-dimensional model from my drawing because they're able to see the forms. So everybody, draw forms, not shapes. So outside of figure drawing, those terms are used interchangeably. But form means 3D, shape means 2-dimensional. Right? Think in 3 dimensions. Okay, so here we have a cylinder that's more or less going side to side. A sphere for the elbow sits inside the socket, and then we have a form that is gently going back. Again, this whole process allows me to analyze the forms in space. The more you analyze what's actually happening, the more you understand what you're drawing. And the more you understand what you're drawing, the better your drawing is going to be. A big part of drawing is the search for understanding. Okay, that sounds super pretentious, but okay. You have to understand what's happening. Okay, so we're going to find our eye level. In this case, eye level is going to be perpendicular to our center line, this way. We're going to find our halfway point, which is going to be perpendicular to our sternum. We already have the halfway point here, we used it. Let's see. Oh, okay, I forgot my little cylinder for the neck. I look at the pose, it looks like it more or less corresponds with what's up there. I move into my line quality. So we're going to talk about line quality in the next series of tutorials. There's a lot to think about. For right now, don't think about it too much, just outline the forms as much as you can to the best of your ability. We shall discuss all this stuff later, little by little by little. Again, hopefully you can see this. I know these tutorials are rough. I know it. I'm not trying to be a YouTube celebrity. Though maybe. Who knows? These could go viral. Maybe not. What else can I tell you about this? Look, again, this is the hardest part of figure drawing. Seeing the simple in the complex, learning how to abstract, to simplify the forms, seeing a big jumble of forms and indicating, aha, the hips are going one way, the rib cage is going another way, how much foreshortening there is. So my advice is actually to do a bunch of drawings where you take the drawing to the last step. The last step that I did, without the contours. So just going over and over again, repeating, building the armature, and the simple geometric forms. The more times you do it, the more times you fail. The more times you fail, the faster you learn this process. So one of the assignments I want you guys to do, as classwork, is to do a bunch of these. I haven't decided exactly how many. We'll think about that later. But on your own. Again, this is much more important than line quality, than shading, than getting everything exactly right, because if you don't learn how to do this, if you don't learn how to abstract, you're going to suffer a lot. because your drawings are going to be incorrect. Okay, we'll talk about head drawing later in a little bit, I promise. We'll get there. Alright, I think I'm going to stop the demo at this point. I'm going to try to keep these demonstrations short so that you don't fall asleep on me.